There are all sorts of different ways to tell a story. I'm partial to a video game, because of its essential nature, which allows the player to engage with the story and forces them to think in totally different ways to other media. I think, more exactly, the game allows a player something other media does not: the opportunity to be a responsible moral actor. Why? Well, before I can answer that, I'm going to have to go back a couple years to 1689, where a philosophical treatise was published, titled An Essay Concerning Human Understanding, by John Locke. Locke argued that, contrary to the received opinion at the time, our concepts of things come from experience and experience only. This started a tradition in Britain known as empiricism, though it has its roots in Aristotle. This carried on through other philosophers such as the Scotsmen David Hume and Adam Smith in the 18th century, both of whom I'll talk about in a moment, right before I get to the video games bit. Locke's view is that each mind is like an unfurnished cabinet, which is filled with ideas through the senses and experiences of the individual. It is through rather elementary procedures of connection and instinct that we come to all the ideas of things we have. This thesis is obviously open to criticism, but it does strike at an intuitive truth. I couldn't know what a tree is before I had experience of a tree. Hume and Smith extended this idea further, not just to things like red or gravity, but to ideas like morality. They saw these as having principles founded in our human nature that interpret the data we get from our senses. I'm going to be speaking really about morality here and the connection to video games. The systems of ethics Hume and Smith built up is known as moral sentimentalism. Smith and Hume saw human nature as the centerpiece of morality. They argued that the feelings of right and wrong we have are just part of this human nature, and we instinctively, like a reflex, judge actions and their relevance to their surroundings, how appropriate they are, as a result of this reflex. Smith and Hume also thought that these principles of morality are self-regulating, and we judge not just others, but ourselves, constantly improving and gauging our decisions through these moral instincts. We might call these principles a moral faculty of the human mind. Smith gives the analogy of an impartial spectator whom we are constantly trying to impress. This thing is like a conscience. We ask ourselves, what might someone else do in this position? Would they agree with my decision? How would they react to seeing me make this choice? And there are obviously some preconditions for us to say that was a moral or immoral decision. The person had to have the freedom to make a choice. Only if you can make the decision or not make it can you be responsible for it. If I were compelled to do a certain action, then you can't be said to have chosen to do it. These ideas of freedom, then, the empiricists hold, can't be innate. They have to be learned. The argument that someone doesn't deserve freedom because they wouldn't know what to do with it falls flat on its face. Obviously they don't know what to do with it, they've never had it. Video games, I think, offer the perfect sandbox for this moral faculty, not only to have the freedom to experiment, but also to develop. In a game, we face a number of different decisions with consequences. We don't always know what those consequences will be, but there are many times where we feel compelled to make certain decisions, illustrating this moral reflex we have. Some of these decisions will lead us to consequences we could neither possibly have foretold nor would have desired, but by compelling the player to make such a decision, we can induce feelings of regret, pride, relief, and this is the essential part of it. There is a responsibility. Even in the way we ordinarily talk about video games, normally saying, oh, I went down the corridor, I did such and such, we confer to ourselves the responsibility for these actions taken. even in a virtual setting. And I think the things this shows us are twofold. It shows us that imposing responsibility and making moral decisions is something we do, sometimes without even realizing it. But more than that, it forces the player to experience the world through the eyes of a character, and as a result emboldens the effect of the moral decisions the character makes. We have disagreements with characters in books or films, as a contrast, disapprove of decisions they make, feel angry at them, but these are passive experiences, not like the active experience of a game. You can never feel responsible for something a character does in a book, because you had no say in it. A film can never make you feel proud or remorseful, because you can't be proud of something someone else has done unless you had a role to play. In a game, however, you, the player, have an active role in determining the events that unfold. Consequently, you have a moral agency. This could be in decisions that others make. For instance, in Dragon Age Origins, where how you respond to characters at certain times can harden them and lead them to make different decisions further down the line. But this responsibility, because it is the players and the players alone, I think it is important to respect. It isn't right for a game, as I've argued before, to measure this morality and condemn actions as right or wrong. In fact, I think the player has to work that out for themselves, based purely on the consequences of their actions, and determine whether they think what they did was right or wrong. It might be justified for the characters in the world itself to express their reactions to the action. If the game tells you what is right or wrong, though, you can't have the responsibility I just outlined a moment ago. If the player is free to judge their own action and determine their own position on it, they feel entirely responsible for its consequences. The effects and burden of making these decisions is felt then directly by the player, and allows for a developmental experience far deeper than something like a book could. While a book or a film may teach a moral lesson, a game allows the player to learn it for themselves, and certainly in my experience, those are the lessons that stick.